Welcome to Employment Law This Week. I'm George Whipple. President Biden's announcement of multiple vaccine mandates set the agency scrambling to release enforcement standards. While we're still waiting on the OSHA ETS and guidance from CMS for healthcare providers, the Safer Federal Workplace Task Force has released guidance and FAQs for federal workers and contractors. Epstein, Becker, Green's Nathaniel Glasser is here to tell us what we can learn from the published guidance.
President Biden signed Executive Order 14042, which requires most federal contracts entered into on or after October 15th to include certain COVID-19 safety protocols. On September 24th, the Safer Federal Workplace Task Force issued guidelines to implement that executive order. And there are three main categories here. The first, and most importantly, is that all covered employees must be fully vaccinated by December 8th. The guidelines will apply to any workplace that includes employees working on or in connection with a federal contract. So that means that employees, even those that are not working on the federal contract, will be required to comply with the guidelines. In addition, any employee doing anything related to that federal contract will be considered an employee working on or connection with that contract. And finally, the guidelines also apply to any remote workers working on a federal contract. In addition to the federal contract or executive order, President Biden also directed OSHA to issue an emergency temporary standard that will cover employers with more than 100 workers across the country, as well as CMS to issue an interim rule for healthcare workers. And each of those requirements will mandate vaccination of covered employees. The task force guidelines here certainly will be instructive, and we're likely to see a broad application of the ETS and the interim rule, likely to include remote workers of covered employers. And we'll also likely see that the ETS and the interim rule allow for some sort of exception based on religious or disability grounds for those individuals not to be vaccinated.
While guidance is still forthcoming, the challenges have already begun. Jill Bigler has more on that from Epstein, Becker, Green's Ohio office.
On September 16th, the attorneys general for 24 states, including Ohio, threatened to take legal action against the Biden administration in response to their recently announced employer vaccine mandate. The attorneys general argue in the letter that the mandate may actually increase skepticism of vaccines and may force a large number of employees out of the job market. The second main argument in the letter focuses on the claim that OSHA has not met the standard for issuing an emergency temporary standard, and therefore the mandate is illegal. To issue an emergency temporary standard, OSHA has to determine that employees are being exposed to a grave danger due to exposure to toxic substances or agents that are toxic or physically harmful, or to new hazards. OSHA also has to determine that the standard is necessary to protect employees from these dangers. OSHA, however, has already concluded that COVID-19 does pose a grave danger to employees when it implemented the emergency temporary standard for healthcare workers earlier this year. If OSHA is challenged on this point, courts are required to give OSHA great deference in what it determines to be a grave danger. In addition to the Attorney's General letter, we've seen two lawsuits filed in recent weeks challenging the vaccine mandate. The first lawsuit, which was filed by the state of Arizona, challenges the mandate on equal protection grounds. In the lawsuit, the state of Arizona argues that the mandate unlawfully favors undocumented immigrants by allowing them the option to decline vaccination when crossing the border. The second lawsuit was filed late last week by a group of federal employees and contractors. This lawsuit challenges not only the Biden administration's vaccine mandate, but also the mandate announced by the Department of Defense earlier this summer. In this lawsuit, workers argue that the mandate violates their constitutional rights to free exercise of religion, due process, and equal protection, as well as their rights to privacy and integrity. The Biden administration has expressed confidence that the mandate will survive legal challenges, including these and others that we expect to see in the weeks and months ahead. But in the meantime, employers should be prepared to comply with the emergency temporary standard once it's issued.
Thanks, Jill and Nathaniel, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.